Have you ever wondered what it would look like if you took 4 people who are obsessed with high power magic and cEDH and forced them to play planeswalkers as their commanders? Probably not, but we decided to do it anyway. First off, I want to preface this by letting you know this video is going to be just a little bit different. We play a lot of games of Magic, and some of them have cool and interesting plays, but are just either over too quickly, or one deck just really shuts down another deck to the point where it's just not fun to watch. And even though they have interesting plays, if we did our normal style of video, there would just be a lot of dead air, and it would kind of drag on a little bit, and we end up just not using those games. So what we wanted to do is change a little bit. Instead of going play by play, we wanted to give you more of a commentary focused narration, where we kind of speed over the plays that are more standard or normal and really focus and explain the plays that are interesting and cool. So there's a little bit more behind the scenes, a little bit more thought process involved, and we thought it might be interesting. So you'll still get the full game, the narration's just tweaked a little bit. Like I said, the reason we wanted to experiment with this style of commentary is because first off, it lets us use these games that we wouldn't normally use, and also it lets us bring in more people to the narration. This style of video would make it very easy for us to bring other Casually Competitive members into the narration, or even guests of the channel. So if you enjoy this style of video, please let us know, and we'll filter these in with our normal videos every so often. Anyway, enough explanation. The decks that we're playing today are Saheeli the Gifted, an Izzet combo control list that wins with Underworld Breach lines, Grist the Hunger Tide, which wins through lines like Witherbloom Apprentice and Chain of Smog, Minsc Boo Timeless Heroes, which is a Gruul Value engine, which uses Dockside Extortionist loops to generate infinite mana, and then Minsc itself to draw out their library, and finally Dihada Binder of Wills, which uses a pseudo World Gorger Dragon line to win the game. Now, if you're interested in a full video of just kind of cEDH-ish Planeswalker commander decks, we are reworking this pod, and we will release that video in the very near future, so why not subscribe so you're notified when that video goes live? But with that all out of the way, let's get into the gameplay. So for the first turn cycle of this game, nothing really of note happens. Jordan plays a Grafdigger's Cage, Adam plays a Sensei's Divining Top, Bill plays an Elvish Mystic, and Nate has a little bit of a bigger first turn by casting a Chrome Mox, Mana Vault, and a Boreal Druid, but all in all, the first turn cycle was pretty tame, people just progressing their boards. The second turn cycle is where things get a little interesting. Jordan starts off by playing a Mountain, Adam plays a Mountain, and then casts a Jeweled Lotus, which gives him enough mana to cast his commander, Dihada Binder of Wills. He decides to use the +2 ability, not targeting anything, just to increase its loyalty. Now, I talked to him after the game about this, and he was actually a little bit scared of him using the negative ability, not hitting anything, and then it getting hit by the Boreal Druid and Elvish Mystic, and then he's kind of back to square one. However, looking at it, in this position, he doesn't really do too much with this explosive turn 2. He just gets a little bit of loyalty on his commander when he could have gone 4 cards deep. He said he was hoping to get around to his next turn cycle where he could cast some more blockers and ensure that his commander survives, but sometimes it is just better to play aggressive and play greedy, because when Bill goes to his turn, well, he casts a turn 2 Tangle Wire, which kind of fucks up Adam's entire plan. Now, I do want to say that I have never been more proud of Bill than I was in this game, because this was, I think, the second or third game that he played a turn 2 or turn 1 Tangle Wire, and I don't know. First off, glad I'm not playing. Second of all, I just think it's really funny. I'm gonna be honest. I've always had a love-hate relationship with Tangle Wire personally. It's a really strong card if you can get it down early and also play around it. But if you get it later in the game, it's kind of more or less a dead card. It has some disruption value, but when people have 6, 7, 8 mana and a bunch of permanents they can tap, it doesn't really slow down the game too much. But when you can play it early, this card can absolutely destroy people's opening hands. Taking them 1 or 2 turn cycles back and having them kind of reset is beautiful. And it kind of shows itself with Nate L's turn. So Bill plays the Tangle Wire, passes the turn. Nate L pretty much has to completely tap out. Now, there is a cool little trick that he does here where he's able to keep his Mana Vault untapped, because for those of you who don't know, the Mana Vault trigger still goes on the stack even if it is untapped. So the way that it works is, since Tangle Wire and Mana Vault are both at the beginning of upkeep, they both go on the stack, but the Mana Vault trigger goes on the stack first because Nate L's the active player, and then the Tangle Wire trigger goes on the stack. So Nate L can tap all of his mana to float it all, tapping all of his permanents, and then the Tangle Wire resolves, seeing all of his permanents tapped, that's satisfied. And then he can pay his mana into his Mana Vault trigger to untap it. So he doesn't really get to do anything with this, but he does get to keep the Mana Vault untapped. He doesn't take damage, and he still gets that mana ramp for when he needs it, once he's out from under the crushing fist that is a turn 2 Tangle Wire. So that was just something I want to mention. He doesn't really do anything else on this turn. He plays a land and then passes. Jordan goes to his turn and just taps everything because he has nothing going on, plays a land, passes to Adam, and Adam's now in a position where he's not doing too great. He has his commander on the battlefield, but he pretty much has to tap all of his permanents in order to satisfy the Tangle Wire. He is able to float his mana before the Tangle Wire resolves, so he can activate his Sensei's Divining Top, but other than that, he goes to his first main phase with his permanents pretty much completely tapped. So he is able to finally use the -2 ability on Dihada, and he does find 2 legendary permanents, which means he gets those to his hand and he ends up getting 2 treasures. But his original plan is kind of completely disrupted due to that Tangle Wire. Now, I don't know if playing aggressive at this point would have really changed too much, but he did have a Kaya Geist Hunter in his hand, and I think his original plan was to try to play that out and activate it before the Dihada negative ability so you get double the treasures. That could have possibly played for itself, but more than that, it could have progressed his board state a little bit more than he's able to at this point. So it just goes to show that a card like Tangle Wire can just absolutely disrupt what people's plans are if it's played correctly. So anyway, after the negative ability, Adam plays the Takenuma as his land for turn, plays a Mox Opal, casts a Grim Hireling, and then passes off to Bill. Now, Bill goes to his turn in a great position because not only did his opponents have a relatively tame turn cycle, but he has a card in his hand that easily gets around this Tangle Wire. So he goes to his turn, he plays a land, he then casts a Dockside Extortionist, getting him 5 treasures. He then casts his commander, and when his commander enters, he gets a hamster, and he then activates the +1 ability on his Planeswalker commander to make his hamster a hasty 4/4 swinger, which is pretty massive for the investment on turn 3. He swings it at Adam's commander, the damage goes through, Adam's commander is destroyed. Bill follows that up by casting an Arbor Elf to end his turn, but he has a 4/4 hamster, which next turn he can use to draw 4 cards. I think Minsc Boo is just a really powerhouse value card, especially in a pod like this that's a little bit maybe slower and grindier. So with that, Bill passes his turn to Nate. Now at this point, Nate can't really do anything fancy. He can keep his Mana Vault untapped, but other than that, he just taps 3 things for Tangle Wire, plays a land, and then passes. Jordan follows suit by doing pretty much the same thing, and then it goes to Adam's turn. Now, Adam's in a little bit of a better position because he does have that Grim Hireling, but with his commander dead and no more Jeweled Lotus, he is significantly behind from where he would like to be. So he goes to his turn, taps 3 things for Tangle Wire, plays a land. He then swings the Grim Hireling at Nate to get 2 treasures, and he then plays a Heart of Kirin. So not really an explosive turn, but he is at least progressing his board state. With that, he kind of passes the turn off to Bill. Bill removes the counter from Tangle Wire, taps 2 things, including Tangle Wire, and at this point, Bill can kind of ignore it, and that Tangle Wire has just gotten massive value for him. So before he draws, he casts a Worldly Tutor, which he tutors up a Temur Sabertooth, which combos directly with Dockside Extortionist, so it looks like Bill's in a pretty good position here. He goes to combat, swings his 4/4 at Nate, and then immediately uses Mink's -2 ability to draw 4 cards from sacrificing his hamster. And that's why I was saying that this card, Minsc Boo, can get just insane value. 4 cards every other turn is a lot of card draw. So he draws 4 cards, and with the damage from that negative ability, he shoots Grim Hireling. And he then ends his turn by casting a Bloom Tender. Now, he does have pretty much all the cards he needs to win at this point. He has Temur Sabertooth, he has Dockside Extortionist, and I believe there are enough things at this point to generate infinite mana. And he can draw his library with his commander, actually. There's a neat little line where you can have the commander kill itself and then recast it, sacrifice the hamster again, etc. But he doesn't have enough mana to start the loop, unfortunately. So he's representing a huge, massive threat by having all of these pieces available. And he's hoping that what's left of his Tangle Wire is enough to kind of keep everyone slowed down so he can get back to his next turn and he can try to win with maybe a little bit more protection. So he passes the turn off to Nate L, who taps 2 things for Tangle Wire, and a card that he draws is just absolutely perfect for the situation. One of, I think, probably the best general removal cards in the game currently. He casts a Culling Ritual, which in this situation is so massive. There's so many low CMC things, especially because of that Tangle Wire, forcing people to have a reduced amount of mana, kind of encouraging them to play their low CMC permanents. He ends up almost completely clearing the board and generating 11 mana. This card is absolutely a cEDH board wipe because it not only takes care of all those valuable creatures, but also mana rocks, win con pieces. I got rid of Dockside Extortionist from Bill. You know, it gets rid of a lot of relevant permanent pieces. It also just catapults you ahead in terms of mana ramp and mana advantage. Nate has 6 black and 5 green mana at the end of this, which he can use to filter into a Peer into the Abyss, which he had in his opening hand. And at this point, withdrawing half of your library and still having a significant amount of mana left over from that Culling Ritual, it's hard to not win. He ends up drawing Witherbloom Apprentice and Chain of Smog, and he just has plenty of mana to get all of this on the battlefield with protection. And honestly, a lot of this really just comes back to effectively playing around someone else's stack speed. I think it's really important to notice that the Tankawire was affecting everyone at the table, but Nate L was able to not only keep his mana vault untapped by paying attention to the different triggers that are going on, but also time his attack perfectly to be in a position where no one could really interact with him effectively because they were either tapped out or they haven't really been able to build up a board state. So he was able to use that to his advantage in order to just play this calling ritual and snowball that into a win.